Okay, we're coming back here with part number 2. And what you see on the screen right now is an app called Remote PC. This allows me to remote access the church's computer. So go in here, it says I'm already in session. So right here is the church's computer. And when you get into this screen, you're going to come up here and you see this, it says utilities up at the top. You're going to click on the utilities. You're going to do the file transfer. And what you see is my computer on the left, church's computer on the right. Church's computer is in the hymns folder right now. What you need to do is come over here to my side on my computer, hit modified. Scroll pretty much all the way down. And everything that we've uploaded is right here, 529.24. So what we have here is the 2 hymns. So I click on one hymn and click on this other hymn, and I hit the send and transfer it over. And it tells me that this hymn right here file already exists. That means we've already got it in the system already. Click yes, and God of grace, God of glory, that one already exists. So you just hit yes, and you don't have to do anything else. So what we're going to do right here is hit this arrow up, and that puts us into the folder where the responsive readings and the scriptures are. Click over here on the scripture, hold the control key down, click on the responsive reading, so both of those are highlighted, transfer those over. Now, since I've already been in here working on this, both of those already exist. So what we do now, we close this out. Come back in here to the folders. Go over here and click on Bookwalter Livestream. And right here is all of our folders that we already currently have in here. Responsive readings and scriptures. I'm going to click on date. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way down. Now I'm into the text files. Now right here, 529.24. Right here is our scripture and responsive reading. So what you need to do right here is the responsive reading. I'm going to left click once, left click one more time. I'm going to control copy. Then I'm going to come over here into a blank space and I'm going to create a folder. Then you're going to control V, paste it, and enter. So just created that folder. Scroll back down to the text files again. Have to do the same thing for the scripture. Click one time, click one more time, Control C to copy it. Come over here and get a new folder. Control V to paste it and enter. Now what we have to do is come right back down to them again. We're going to have to double click quickly to open up the text files we transferred over. So now we're going to come down here to the church's computer. We're going to get a notepad from the church's computer, move that over to where we can see everything. And this is where you have to break it down to get the little tiles that you see on Sunday morning. So come right here and copy this, Control C, come over here, Control V to paste it. File, save as, and we're in 2 Corinthians, which is not the folder we want to be in, so arrow up. Based on Psalms 31, we're doing responsive reading, so we need to double click and make sure that we're in this folder every time we do something. And right here, you're going to type in responsive reading number 1. And hit enter. So now you're going to come down here to the next section. You're going to copy that, Control C, Control V to paste it. File, save as, make sure you're in this folder. You just left click one time, backspace, responsive reading 2, save it. And you'll see why we're doing this when it comes time to set up the service. I'm going to copy this section right here, Control C, Control V, File, save as, make sure you're in this Psalms 31 folder, left click, backspace, responsive reading number 3. Scroll down and get this last one. Control C, Control V, File, save as, left click, backspace, number 4. So now that folder is complete. So now we got to come to the scripture. Double click, open that up, move it over, come to the church's computer, get another notepad, and we're going to go right here through verse 7. We're going to copy this through end of verse 7, Control C, Control V, File, save as, hit this arrow up button. We need to come up here and double click on this to make sure we're in the 2 Corinthians folder. File name, click on that. Scripture 1. And then we're going to come down here and get this section from 8 through 12. Control C, Control V, File, save as, left click once, backspace, Scripture 2. That takes care of the scriptures. So now, go back to my computer down here, pull up the email. These hymns are already in there, but I'm going to delete one out so I can show you the whole process of doing the hymns. I guess we'll do the first one, God of Grace and God of Glory. So come back here to the church's computer. We're going to go back up into the hymns. I'm going to search for it. God of Grace and God of Glory. See, we already have a folder. And see, this is exactly, you do this exactly how you did the scripture and responsive readings. You pull up the text file, open up another notepad, and you got to break everything down. Let me see if I can go back here. see. Let me pull up the text files here. So there's the text file. And don't know what happened on that one. Why it's out of whack. But I can straighten that out. File. Save as. God of grace, God of glory. Save. So basically, once you have this pulled up, you're going to come over here and get another notepad and do the same things we did for the scriptures and for the responsive reading. What's a little different is you're going to have to copy the hymn title along with the CCLI license number. Control C, file, Control V. Then you go file, save as, God of grace, God of glory. So now you're in that folder, and you would just save it as hymn title, and you do the same thing for each and every verse. You come in here and copy that first verse, Control C, Control V, paste it, file, save as, just like we did with responsive reading. You got to break everything down into verses and into sections. So now, what I always do is I'll come in here and I'll open up our broadcasting software, OBS program. And this is what we broadcast to everybody. This has to be set up. So what I like to do is I like to come in here and get my email to start with. And I'll get the pastor's sermon and copy it. Control C. Go back in here to OBS. Double click on sermon. Double click on sermon title. And highlight that. Control V, paste it. And right there is his sermon. That's not the only place we got to have the sermon in. We got to come in here to the introduction. Double click on introduction. We're going to come down here to sermon title and scripture. Double click there. We're going to come up here to the message. Control V, copy, and there's this week's. Now go back to the email, and we're going to copy the scripture. Control C, come back over here, and I'm going to leave the NIV in place. We're just going to go right here to last week's and highlight it. Control V, paste in this week's. So we got this week's scripture in there. And if for some reason this don't line up, you can unlock this and you can move the thing around, center it up, make it bigger. And you always want to lock it back up so we don't accidentally hit it. So we got this week's sermon, this week's scripture. We'll come back up here to this later on. So what we do now, I'm going to go back to my email, and I'm going to get Todd's offertory. Control C to copy it. Go back in here. Come right up here to offertory. Double click. Double click on this offertory text. Come right in here. Highlight last week's. Control V to paste. And there's this week's offertory. So now we're going to go do the hymns. So back to the email. Our first hymn is God of Grace and God of Glory. So we go back in here, and we're going to go to this right here. It says hymn title. That's what this is right here with our CCLI license. Going to double click on hymn title. And come over here to browse. And you want to arrow up to get back into all the folders. And since I've already searched for God of Grace, it's going to be easy. Click on God of Grace in the search bar. Scroll down. Right there you see the folder for God of Grace, God of Glory. Double click. And then double click on the hymn title. God of Grace, God of Glory. Hit OK. And it shows up right here. Come to the first verse. Go browse. And I always look over here to see if it pops up over here, which it hasn't. I'm going to arrow up. I'll come back over here. God of Grace, God of Glory. Right there's God of Grace, God of Glory. Folder, double click. Verse 1. And if you need to change the size of it, if it's, I'm going to do an example. Right now it's on 65. If it looked like you're missing some of the verse, go to 50, show you what it does. So we know 65 is good. It was back over here to 65. Hit OK. It just changes your font, makes it bigger or smaller, but you want to make sure you get the whole verse in there. So we hit OK. Come to verse 2. Browse. And it's not over here on the left yet. So we click. Back to our search. God of Grace, God of Glory. We'll double click on verse 2. And it looks like the entire verse is in there. Let's see what the font size is. It's on a 64, a little smaller, but it looks the same. So I'm going to OK that. Verse 3, browse. There's God of Grace, God of Glory popped over here, which makes it easier. Just double click. Come over here and double click verse 3. And it all fits, looks good. I'll save that. Verse 4, browse. God of Grace, God of Glory. Go over here to verse 4. And that all fits. Hit OK. So now, just going to turn them on one at a time. This is how you turn the verses on and off with these little eyeballs. Verse 4, verse 3, verse 2, verse 1. So that takes care of that. Now I'll go right down the list here to responsive reading. Double click responsive reading. And the responsive reading, I already know we had 4. So right here I've got number 4 created. Didn't use it last week. I'm going to just click on it and drag it up. So now you come right in here to responsive reading 1. Double click. Then you're going to go browse. Then you're going to arrow up. I'm going to hit this date button. Hoping the based on Psalms 31 would show up the top, but it's probably going to be at the bottom. Right here, Psalms 31. Double click. Responsive reading 1. And that size actually looks good, and I believe it got all of it in there. So we don't have to change the font. I'm going to click OK. Go to number 2. I'm going to come over here and left click on Browse. Based on Psalms 31. Good, it popped up over here early. Click on that. Responsive reading 2. Leader people. Look like it got everything in, didn't cut anything off, so don't have to change the font size on that. Just out of curiosity, it's at a 50. So close that out. Go to number 3, hit the Browse, Psalms 31, number 3. Now this looks like it's cut off quite a bit. So come in here, select the font, see the font size shows 66. We're going back down to what the other one was, a 50, and hit the OK. And it's still trying to cut part of it off. So we'll just drop down to 48 and hit OK. And it's trying to cut stuff off over here. This is just an experiment. You just have to kind of play with this till you get it right. I'm going to try 49 and see what 49 does. 49 looks a lot better, so we'll go with it. Go in here, Browse, Psalms 31, click, double click. And this one's a little small. We could actually make it a little bigger. Let's try 55. Yeah, it's trying to cut the P off a little bit right there. Let's go a little bit bigger, 56. That looks good. Save that. So now I'll come back in here and turn all these on one at a time, starting from the 4th one. Responsive reading 4, 3, 2, and 1. Gotta see what's going on. Something's going on. Don't know what's going on with that. That hadn't happened before, but that's what it's supposed to do. And this one's out of whack somehow. Don't know how that happened. It's never happened before. 2, 3, 4. We'll play with that later. Now come down here to the second hymn. The second hymn is the one that had to be typed in manually. So let's see here. We'll come up to hymn title. We're going to do a browse. We're going to arrow up to get into the folders. We're going to search, and that is Lord Whose Love in Humble Service. And right there it is. 4 verses. And right here's the hymn title. So that gives us the hymn title. There's only 4 verses, so we can click right here and hold. Drag that 5th verse out of the way. Maybe. Now it's out of the way. So now we're going to go to verse 1. We're going to browse. We're going to hit the arrow. We're going to do the search. And we're going to come up here and get this first verse. Now it looks like it's losing a bunch. So we're going to downsize it. We're going to go to 60. And it looks like that did it. I got lucky. So now we're going to go verse 2, double click, then browse. Arrow up. Come over here and search for it. And we're going to double click on verse 2. That's way too big. Go 60 again. On the size. Hit OK. That one looks good. Verse 3. Double click, then browse. Still hadn't popped up over on this side, so arrow up again. Back over here, back to the search. Back to the folder. Back to being way too big again. Downsize that to 60. That one looks good. Hit OK. Verse 4. Browse. And it finally popped up over here. Click once. And why it changed the order, I don't know. But come up here and double click verse 4. Select the font. Downsize it again to 60. Hit OK and OK. So now turn on verse 4. Verse 3. Verse 2, verse 1, so that has the second hymn. Now the scripture. Double click on the scripture. Double click on scripture 1 and hit browse. We're going to hit the arrow up. And we're just going to scroll back down here. 2 Corinthians 4, which is put in there today. So double click on that. Double click on scripture 1. It's a little bit big, so we're going to have to bring it down a little bit. Let's try 46. Bingo. Oh, almost. Cutting that word off. Let's try 45. Still cutting it off a little bit. Let's go down to 44. Hit OK. That's better. Not quite as cut off. One more try. Go with 43. And hope it don't change it too much. Hit OK. That looks better. So now we're going to come to number 2, Scripture 2, double click, hit the browse. And don't know why I'm getting a death circle. Okay, whatever. And that's the wrong one. That's why you always got to check this folder. That's last week's. Okay. We're missing the entire verse 12, so let's go to 43. And there it is, verse 12. So come back in here and turn on verses 8 through 12, look them over, turn on verses 5 through 7, looks good. Continue on to the third hymn. I don't believe there's 6 verses in the third hymn, but we'll go to hymn title, go back to the email. Christ for the world we sing. So I'm going to browse, I'm going to arrow up, go in there to the search bar, right there, Christ for the world. Double click on the folder. Oops, don't want that. Okay, it's got 4 verses. Hymn title, Christ for the world we sing. So there's our hymn title. Drag a couple of these verses out of the way that we don't need. Okay, come in here, double click on first verse, browse, arrow up, come in here to search, and right there it is, verse 1. And that's too big, cutting everything off. Let's go to 60, see what happens. That'll work. Go to verse 2, double click, hit the browse button, arrow up, search, Christ for the world, double click on the folder, double click on verse 2, way too big. So come in here, change the font size down to 60 on that. Hit OK. Verse 3, browse, finally popped up over here. So verse 3 is way too big. Take the font down to 60. Looks good. Verse 4, double click, browse, double click, font size too big, back down to 60, and that's okay. Go back and check it all. Verse 4, get this eyeball, verse 3, turn on verse 2, verse 1. So now that has everything from all 3 hymns to responsive reading, scriptures, sermon titles, offertory titles, so all of that is done. So now I'm going to come back up here and click on the intro screen at the very top. Yeah, we'll go in here. May leave that song the same this week. I'm not sure yet. Let's see here. But if you go right here where it says Good Old Gospel Singing, this little play button, double click and hit the browse, it puts you into our music folder where we got music downloaded. You can go in here and look, and it'll tell you the length of the songs when you hover over it. Don't have a lot of music in this folder yet because it has to be converted over to a WAV file to be able to work. But we'll go ahead and change it just to show you how to do it. So we'll do Goodbye World, Goodbye this week. So double click and it shows that right there. Hit OK. Now you want to right click right here, rename. Don't have to do this, but I always do this. And hit the enter. Double check, make sure I spelled it right. Okay, now to change this up here, you got to come right up above that. Double click on song selection. I want to highlight that. Just type it in. And I can't type. There we go. Hit OK. Now see how that run over? So what I'm going to do, you can do one of two things. You can unlock it and make it a lot smaller. But what I'm going to do, double click it again. I'm going to go right before the G right here. And I'm going to hit enter, drop it down a line. And there we go. So now that's pretty much everything set up. God of Grace, responsive reading. Of course, we've already got the Glorias, Lord's Prayer, prayer response, all that in there. Offertory, doxology, the second hymn, the scripture, the sermon title, third hymn, and we changed the music for the intro. So now what I have to do is come over here. Let's see, Sunday's date, I believe it's the 3rd. Double check. Nope, Sunday's the 2nd. So, oh, I'm forgetting stuff. We have communion this week and birthdays. So communion will slide up here right before the third hymn. Birthdays are going to slide up here before the first hymn. And that's May birthdays, so got to come over here, double click on this, browse. It's in the wrong folder, so go back over here to Livestream. There's where we need. Look for June birthdays. There's June birthdays. Double click on that. Hit OK. And it's way out of whack, so we got to unlock it. Bring the size way down. Come on. There we go. I don't know how it got so big. Still huge. Close enough. Lock that down, so there's the June birthdays. Now, what we got to do, we got birthdays, we got communion, make sure. And looks like I forgot to turn the camera off. Oh well. Now we're going to come in here and go settings. We're going to click on this stream right here. And click on use stream key. And click on get stream key. This takes us to our YouTube page. Because if you don't go in here and change these dates every Sunday, then you can click the live stream button all you want, and it's not going to send anything anywhere. So we got to hit edit. Click right here. Got to change this to June 2nd. And we're going to save it. We're going to close that out right there. We're going to hit OK right there. And that is everything. That is the whole process for setting up the Sunday service.